I'm Beth Pariseau, Senior News Writer at Informa Tech Target, and this is ITOps Query Season 3, Observability in the Age of AI. Gregg Siegfried is a Gartner Vice President and Research Analyst specializing in monitoring and IT operations. He also has more than 30 years of experience within the telecommunications, education, healthcare, and data analysis industries, where he has held senior-level positions in software development, enterprise architecture, IT strategy and operations, networking, and security. Thanks for being with us, Gregg.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, your research focuses on observability. How have you seen generative AI change the observability market the last couple of years?
Yes, I think some form of generative AI capabilities become kind of table stakes and participate in the observability market, but the capabilities are leveling up some. The first generation, I'll say, of such things we saw were kind of a natural language interface for an operator to ask questions, so kind of an assistant or co-pilot. But it could be an error message, it could be a request to perform some action on the observability platform itself. Those certainly helped customers decrease time to value on those products by making them easier to use. And it also allowed incidental users to avoid learning things like a custom query language. So they were helpful. The capabilities now are advancing well beyond those interactive chat-based interfaces, and that they maintain enough dynamic information about the workloads that in many cases you don't need to ask them questions at all. They'll let you know what you want to know straight away. Some observability platforms are even supporting RAG now to allow better customization and fine tuning. So the reason I think that's important is that often these observability platforms are being used under fire, right? Something's broken, something potentially costing the organization time and money, and revenue or customer goodwill, and the complexity of modern applications is such that the one person trying to work on that problem may not know much about that application. And so, having that Gen AI LLM based information right in front of them saves money, gets the system back online more quickly, and it helps them in the sense they don't need to look at every single haystack to find where the problem lies.
So observability tools for a long time have obviously alerted people to an issue, but is it the summarization capability that's different with these generative AI tools?
It is summarization is a big part of it. They can capture and synthesize, summarize information much better than products had done before. But it's also if they're maintaining a knowledge graph or some sort of a topology-based diagram of the workloads being monitored, they can kind of proactively process the telemetry coming in from the application, from the infrastructure, and in that sense, kind of proactively offer the insight. So, for example, somebody might, if they wanted to drop down to the chat interface or the interactive interface, and they didn't see any alerts, they could ask the question like, which of my applications are not performing well today, and it'll know. First, it'll know what the applications the individual wants to know about are. Then they'll know what not performing well means to that particular person,
Right.
and give them an idea of exactly what they need to know at that particular moment in time.
Okay. And so, what role has observability played in the development of those generative AI apps and using generative AI tools? Is there a bidirectional relationship there?
It's been kind of two worlds so far. The presence of generative AI and AI applications generally have certainly added some use cases to observability.
Oh, like what?
I mean, for a lot of organizations with their observability platforms, the AI observability or LLM observability is limited to managing latency, understanding token usage, understanding your API calls into a public generative AI site like OpenAI. Now, those are very important, and they seem a lot more like traditional AI-based use cases than not, right? But where it gets trickier is understanding the actual, let's say, the performance of the models. Is it generating hallucinations? Is it being attacked from a security perspective? Then what's the quality of the model? Those have normally not been the province of an I&O team or IT team. Like understanding the behavior of a machine learning model or an AI application is more the province of the data team that was responsible for the training.
Right.
But normally, in a lot of organizations, those folks are not the kind of people that are going to be on call. Right? There's not really an AI SRE at this point defined.
Right.
So when you do get to the point where you are monitoring your generative AI application and it starts going off the rails, who do you call and when do you call them? And so understanding what the job roles are going to be associated with generative AI applications is something that we're yet to quite figure out.
So what I was going to say is what I've heard is that observability in that LLM world has another layer, let's say. It's not necessarily about this system returned this error or is the system up or down, but are the LLM answers of good quality?
Mhm.
Not just is this system working, but is the system working well? And that seems like a kind of a new frontier in terms of observability practitioners. Have you seen similar things? Have you heard similar discussions?
That's a hard question to answer. Is it
Mm.
working well, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, that's where it's all ultimately going to come down to traces or something like traces, right? And that's there's the open LLMetry extensions to open telemetry that you can help you monitor
Mm.
LLM-based applications like traditional applications, and then it's who analyzes that telemetry. So
Hmm.
if it's the data person who's able to see, hey, that the application has gone off the rails, but it's alerting very similar to traditional alerting, but it is very much understanding who's going to be alerted, and so you'll end up having kind of a bifurcated support model there, where the IT team will be responsible for the latency, the performance, kind of in the traditional sense. And that way, it looks kind of like a database application where you're sending a request in, you're waiting for a while, you're getting a response back. But then, as far as the quality of the response, that's something that's got to be evaluated by something else. You may be thresholds involved in that telemetry, but then when it goes bad, the alert's going to go to whether we define an AI SRE or some other support person for those types of applications.
Mm.
It's probably not going to be something that traditional IT ops teams are going to deal with.
Okay. So we already have this upheaval that's happened so blindingly fast, and no sooner have we gotten our arms around that, at least mentally, than we have agentic AI coming on the scene. So how do you see that changing the equation here?
Agentic AI.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a word that I now hear multiple times every day
Uh-huh.
that just a few months ago, probably never heard it at all.
Yeah.
So it is evolving very rapidly.
Yeah.
If agentic AI lives up to its promise, I think IT operations and IT operations and observability provide some rich opportunities for agents.
Mm.
There are obvious things like self-healing. There's autonomous workload optimization that could be facilitated by an agent's ability to react to telemetry.
Hmm.
It also changes the way operators interact with their observability tools. They could look very different than today, where you're looking at a lot of graphs, a lot of thresholds and things, alerts potentially on the screen. I think it also may change the way IT operations products interact with each other.
Mm.
So instead of connecting your IT operations tools via something like a webhook, which has kind of been the time-honored tradition, having an interface like this model context protocol that has been coming up lately
Hmm.
as a way to connect agents with each other or to connect them with data, kind of a variation of RAG. And that it may also change the way IT operations products are purchased.
Hmm.
If Dynatrace, for example, had a way to package their Davis AI engine as an agent, the package their capabilities as an agent there, that would be a very interesting way for them to offer it via a different kind of channel into different types of organizations
Mm.
than those that may have been their traditional customers.
More business stakeholders, in other words.
Right.
Okay. The other thing is sometimes I wonder if this whole idea of an agent, a framework of agents, is a new thing for IT ops to fix when it's broken. Because, the more layers of abstraction we add onto infrastructure, the more difficult it becomes to pinpoint root cause when they don't behave the way they should. So are people even really at the point of grappling with that yet? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, it takes us back to the earlier questions as well. It
Yeah.
just kind of multiplies them by 10, right? And if you instead of monitoring an AI application, now you're monitoring tens or hundreds of them, and and you're dependent on them for the proper functioning of your organization.
Hmm.
Could be a big headache. I suspect that there'll be some hesitance to deploy them at scale, except in fairly well understood use cases.
Right.
Same way that, well, I think they'll have a huge impact on how we think about self-healing of software systems. They're things that we'll be taking very slow steps towards.
Yeah.
There are simple use cases just in the way people have deployed automation. Right? You may automate the easiest things to automatically launch from a monitoring tool these days are, like say cycling a compute instance or
Mm.
redeploying an application, tasks that are easily automated every day that you're just using another trigger from a monitoring tool of some kind. I think the agent adoption will take a similar path where there'll be some well-known, well-understood use cases that you'll allow without humans saying okay first, and then may gradually over time, depending on the color of the workloads that the organization has, they may allow more advanced things. But yeah, it's certainly going to be the Wild West for a while.
And a lot of these sort of promises about agentic AI and self-healing systems were things that first came onto my radar anyway, 6, 7, 8 years ago with AIOps.
Mhm.
So how are agents going to be different from that? Because that never quite got to the proverbial NoOps. How are agents differentiated from AIOps, do you think?
Well, hopefully agents will have more of a defined a definition than AIOps ever did.
Right.
It
Yeah.
was kind of whatever you felt it was going to be, it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
The outcomes will be very similar, right? The promise of bringing in, let's say, an AI ops platform to kind of tie together to the different alert generations tools that you had in the observability tools. A lot of organizations got that to work.
Mm-hmm.
It was not universal. It takes a lot more time and energy, I think, than folks were willing to put into it. But so the outcome will be very similar, but hopefully it'll be easier.
Mm.
And these are as opposed to being large platforms. Hopefully, the agents will be packaged in a way that they're more easily consumable,
Mm.
more easily understandable, more easily debuggable, such that they're relying on another. If you have some number of observability platforms, monitoring tools in your environment, you bring in then another umbrella tool on top of those that was designed to tie all those other things together.
Mm.
That was the part where the AI platform business kind of fell apart. And now there's much more reliance on a smaller number of observability platforms these days, and so less of a need for a large additional platform on top of them, but as a point of extensibility or a point of augmentation. They're bringing in some agents from trusted vendors to serve a specific limited or constrained purpose,
Mm.
I think is a much more understandable value proposition for the IT leaders to consume than trying to bring in some much larger platform.
Yeah, in a way, kind of separating the data management aspect from the automation.
Hmm?
And also, speaking of data management, what's come up in a lot of my conversations about AI observability so far this year is this idea of observability 2.0. Is that something that you've been hearing about as well? And how do you think that factors into all this?
I've actually had conversations with charity majors I know that was
Yeah.
on your show recently here.
Uh-huh.
We're in relative agreement as far as the character of what she's called 1.0 and 2.0
Mm-hmm.
with respect to the 2.0 or the data lake based observability platforms where you're centralizing your telemetry into one or a much smaller number of places
Mm.
so that they can be analyzed together. I mean, I think that's how the products are starting to shake out. That's how buyers are starting to think about these products. So I think that works. But most of the larger vendors in the space have already kind of moved to that direction anyway. And the newer players, it's becoming very common for new entries to the observability market to take something like a ClickHouse as a back end and put a open telemetry collector in front of it, a nice user interface, and that's kind of it's a pattern that's used to build observability platforms. Now each vendor has their own kind of take on that,
Mm.
but that is kind of the observability 2.0 platform model where you've got a database, you've got almost a data lake kind of an environment, and you're able to run arbitrary analytics against the telemetry that you feed into it in order to gain insights about the behavior of the applications and what's going wrong or what's not going wrong.
Yeah, I also recall there being some struggles with AI ops tools in terms of data quality management. Do you think the industry has gotten better at that too in more recent history, or is that still going to be an issue for AI?
That you could take a couple of viewpoints on that.
Mm.
Beth, you could say that, well, the generative AI engines are very good at addressing things like data quality, right? They may be able to overcome those limitations better than things could before. Because you're right, if you had an alert correlation or event correlation system that was taking events from 5, 10 different monitoring tools and trying to correlate them, each one may have called the same thing by a different name, right? Just think a host name versus node name versus, and so a lot of the heavy lifting you had to do was to try and map all those fields and find some way to ensure that they would treat them the same way.
Hmm.
That's something that the generative AI engines are kind of doing naturally, and they'd overcome that much more easily than the existing platforms would.
Cool. So I know this is kind of an impossible question, but in your opinion, if you had to guess, where do you think the industry will be with AI observability and all of these topics in another year or 5 years or even longer than that? Any predictions you can share with us?
Possible. That's one way to put it. In the AI or LLM observability in particular, in a year, hopefully, we figured out who the actors are associated with understanding the health and performance of AI-based workloads, right? We
Hmm.
figured out whether there are going to be AI SREs, or there are going to be people in the AI engineering department that are going to be on call like there is with ITOps.
Hmm.
We'll figure out where it sits in an organization, and then we'll see that AI observability tools are more widely available from vendors than they are today. Perhaps even some open source tools.
Cool.
5 years, I would almost be afraid to say, right? Things have moved so quickly recently.
Yeah, I hear you.
I expect that by that time, for at least some type of workloads, we'll see much more self-driving or autonomous operation. Right? So it just may not be everywhere, but it'll at least be more common than it is today to put a machine in control of maintaining specific health and performance parameters of certain types of workloads. There may be different types of signals that different organizations are willing to put under machine control,
Hmm.
but I think it'll be much more, at the same time, it'll be much more common for organizations to run their own LLM-based business workloads rather than relying as heavily on the public LLM services as they are today.
Hmm.
But so beyond that, I don't know. I mean, most of the science fiction about AI is pretty dystopian.
Yeah.
Or I want to go on record with my worldview along those lines.
That's a whole other topic.
The cloud providers are likely to be the ultimate beneficiaries of kind of the widespread AI, just given the concentration of compute power and data they have at their disposal.
Yep.
But I think we will be surprised by the number of organizations that are willing to go it alone as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are those data privacy concerns that people have with the cloud providers.
We see a lot more of that even lately. But being willing to build a data center these days, large enough to say train
Mm,
a non-trivial model and keep it trained is something that's going to take some expense.
absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your insights as always, and thanks for sharing them.
Well, thanks again for having me on the show.
This has been IT Ops Query Season 3, Observability in the Age of AI. If you have any feedback on this episode or want to share questions, comments, or stories we should consider covering, please reach out to me at beth.pariseau, that's PARISEAU, at informatechtarget.com. Please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to this podcast on your platform of choice, and tune in next week for our continued conversations with industry experts about how observability is shaping AI and how AI is shaping observability.